Hey, I'm back again. Yeah, a little bit more information has surfaced about this game, and it made me want to do just a bit of a slight update to my previous analysis video. Mainly because I found a few screenshots, and looking over them, I actually found out a few things that I think are quite interesting. Now, firstly, let's talk about the obvious stuff. This screenshot is from a Japanese, I think, released to retailers or something like that, so no wonder I never had access to it. It was from the serenesforest.net website. But basically, this screenshot seems to show the avatar on the Nor path, but we actually get a good look at his stats here. Now, let's start again with the obvious stuff. Firstly, his class being Dark Prince. This was, weirdly enough, a class exclusive to the final boss of the fourth game. But the class here seems to bear absolutely no resemblance to the one from the earlier game. Mainly, it uses swords and dragonstones here, but Dark Prince back there was basically just a superpowered version of Sage, so yeah, not exactly the same class. Now, I'm wondering if on the Hoshido path his class will be Light Prince? And, I mean, what does this mean for what his class will be on the third path? Maybe Grey Prince or something? But hey, that's pure speculation. Now, like I said before, this class does seem to use both swords and dragonstones. I got kind of a funny story here. Literally a few days before this Nintendo Direct went up, I was just walking, and I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be cool if there was a Fire Emblem class that used both swords and dragonstones? And this happened. Yeah, I seem to have developed bizarre psychic powers out of nowhere. But anyway, from the looks of things, Dragonstones actually have ranks here, which is pretty cool, I will admit. This implies we'll be seeing more Dragonstones than just the normal Dragonstone and the Dragonstone Plus that we saw in Awakening. Now, I'm wondering if this means the different Dragonstones from Mystery of the Emblem might be returning. Things like the Wyvern Stone, Mage Stone, even Earthstone might be coming back. It's not unreasonable to assume that they'd require higher weapon ranks to equip, so that sounds like an interesting idea. Now, the other thing that people seem to have gathered from this screenshot is that if this is to be believed, weapons have infinite uses now. I'm not entirely sure whether I really buy this, though, because, well, one, this is a pre-release screenshot, and even Awakening, there was a lot of stuff in Awakening that turned out to be very different to how it was in the final game from pre-release screenshots. Like this version of Lonku's critical portrait, for example. People are saying that this thief enemy here seems to have some kind of an infinite use iron bow. Though, again, maybe this is a new feature of a casual mode, or it's just pre-release stuff and they haven't finalized the weapon uses yet, because they do tend to change around with every game. Honestly, though, I really hope that this isn't true, because, honestly, I think that breakable weapons is just a huge part of Fire Emblem. In fact, I'm fine with the addition of casual mode since it's an optional feature, but removing weapon durability entirely, it would kind of remove something that's in the essence of Fire Emblem to me. Breakable weapons are such a big part of Fire Emblem that in Robin's appearance in Super Smash Bros., they actually made it a gameplay mechanic for him, so taking them away right after that seems kind of strange. Now, one other thing, and this seems to go more into the line of speculation, but the skills. Now, people seem to have noticed that characters now seem to have 6 skill slots rather than 5, as it was in Awakening. However, one of these skills seems to have a larger border around it. Now, this is purely speculation, so we have no confirmation on this, but here's what I think. I think that characters still only have 5 skill slots. 5 skills that they can freely choose. However, every class has its own class-specific skill that anyone who's in that class will always have. And that's what the skill in the bigger border is. It would sort of make sense, and it would give you incentive for actually staying in certain classes rather than just reclassing out of them immediately after you've gained the skills from them. I just think this would be an interesting feature. Just have every class have its own unique skill that you can only use while in that class, while still keeping other skills that you can freely change around. It kind of is the best of both worlds, from Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn's mastery skill system that were exclusive to specific classes, and the system for Awakening that was more customizable. Maybe it would also mitigate how broken lethality could be in Awakening by making it so that only assassins could use that, or for example, making it so that only Dark Flyers can use Gale Force. Now, the one interesting thing about this theory is that the generic thief from before doesn't even seem to have a skill in this big highlighted slot. Now, that could be a case of enemies simply not having these on lower difficulty modes, which was the case with Awakening. But, personally, I think there's something else that points to another explanation. Notice here the thief is level 7. Now let's look back at the avatar. The avatar here, as you'll see, is level 11, so possibly these classes won't learn these skills until they reach level 10. That seems like a fairly reasonable explanation. Now, as for what the avatar's other skills are, I can't really make any good guesses. One of them kind of looks like Rightful King. The other one, I'm really not sure about. That green one, I don't really know what that is, so either skill icons are completely different now, or they've changed around what a lot of the skills are. Now, most of these things that I've been talking about, other people have already analysed, but I have come up with a few more things myself that I realised from looking at these stats. Now, firstly, notice how, and now this is a bit annoying to explain for people who don't read Japanese, but in the avatar stats, okay, you can see, okay, I'm going to go from the left column going down and then the right column going down. Strength, magic, skill, speed, and now I'm in the right column now. Speed is the top one there. Luck, defense, resistance. Now, something I found that's kind of strange is that the speed and defense stats seem to be green. Well, obviously they are green, and resistance is red. Now, originally I was thinking that maybe it's because the weapon that he has equipped gives a small boost to speed and defense. I mean, that would make sense, so the green stats there showing that stats that have been increased by some kind of passive effect. But the resistance being red is strange, because I don't think I've ever heard of a weapon that lowers one of your stats. So I really don't know what this is. Maybe he's been affected by some kind of debuff, or unless the red there is just signifying a stat that's particularly low, I'm not really sure. Anyway, from the stats here, we can glean that the avatar seems to basically be pretty much a jack of all trades, having decent skill and speed and also very good strength and defense. I mean, as you kind of expect from a Manakete type character. 8 magic also is not really all that bad for a level 11 primarily physical user, so maybe that's for magical dragonstones possibly? Yeah, his weaknesses seem to be luck and resistance, which are quite a bit lower than his other stats. But it's not the actual stats that I'm mainly concerned with. I'm actually concerned with those stats just below his HP. Attack, critical, hit rate, and avoid. Now, looking at those and applying a few of the calculations from Awakening, I've determined something that might have interesting implications. So here I've circled critical just so you can see it more clearly. So here the avatar has a critical rate of 4. Now, I went to this and applied the critical formula from Fire Emblem Awakening. That was weapon critical plus skill over 2. Now, I'm assuming that the weapon he has equipped has no critical rate here, because it would actually be kind of weird if it did, because it'd have to have a critical rate of pretty much 1, 2, or 3, which I doubt you'd see a critical rate like that in a weapon. That wasn't forged anyway. But let's see. The avatar has 13 skills, so that divided by 2, rounding down, would be 6, and yet the avatar actually has 4 critical. That's weird. Let's go back to Mr. Generic Thief for a second. Now, he's listed here as having 2 critical, and his skill is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4, which would mean by Awakening's formula he would have 4 critical, but he actually has half that. Just what is going on here? Well, there's only one explanation for this. The critical formula has changed since Fire Emblem Awakening. I found that if you apply the calculation as skill over 3, rounding down, not over 2, the numbers actually check out. 8 over 3 is something like 2.66666 or something like that, so rounding that down you get 2. Back to the avatar, 13 over 3, rounding down, well, I mean, 12 divided by 3 is 4, so we get 4. That's interesting. So, from if my calculations are correct, the critical formula has actually been changed in this game since Awakening from skill over 2 to skill over 3, which means that critical rates have actually been nerfed. That seems kind of interesting, but I guess it makes sense. In Awakening, skill stats could go very, very high, sometimes almost as much as 50, so having that divided by 2 and added directly to your critical rate was kind of overpowering. So here I'm guessing they seem to have toned down criticals to compensate for the higher stats overall, and that definitely seems like a reasonable decision. But if the critical formula has changed, maybe some other formulas have changed too, so I went and applied the calculations for Awakening's formula to avoid as well. So here I've circled the avatar's evasion, 23. Now, to calculate evasion in Awakening, you'd triple the character's speed, add their luck, and then divide the resulting number by 2. So let's do that here. The avatar here has 13 speed, triple that is 39, add 7, and we get 46. Divide that by 2, and we get 23, which actually does check out with the evasion displayed in the circled number. So this seems to show that while the critical formula has been changed in this game, the evasion formula is the same as it is in Awakening. I guess that makes sense, since evasion usually benefits you more than it does the enemy, but still, I mean, evade rates could get very, very high in Awakening, and that could get pretty overpowered, so I'm a little surprised they nerfed critical hits but not evasion in this game. Well, I mean, I'm glad they at least didn't go with, Shadow Dragon's terrible evasion formula, but still. Just for fun, let's bring Mr. Generic Thief in as an example again. His evasion is listed as 19, so let's see if the formula checks out. Triple speed, that's 12 times 3, which is 36, add 3 to give you 39, divide that by 2, yeah, I guess the numbers do check out there. That would be 19 accounting for rounding. While I'm in the mood to do some more math calculations, let's see if we can figure out the Yatogami, that's the weapon that the avatar has equipped here. Let's see if we can figure out its might and hit rate. So, you'll see here the avatar has an attack power of 24. Now, their sword rank is D, so there's going to be no increases to that based on the ranking. That only makes a difference when it's C or above, so we can ignore that. Now, I mean, this is a lot easier to calculate than the other formulas. We just simply subtract the avatar's strength from that attack value, and we get 8. So it looks like the Yatogami has 8 might. That's definitely better than Crom's personal weapon, which only had 5 might, so looks like this game's main character wins there. As for the hit rate, though, now this was sort of bizarre. I did the calculation involving hit rate for the avatar's skill stat based on Awakening's formula, subtracted it from the hit rate shown there of 108, and for some bizarre reason, the number that I came back with was 76? I don't exactly see a weapon having a hit rate of 76. That seems like a bit of a weird number. So either the evade formula has changed, I did something wrong in my calculations, or I forgot to round and its hit rate is actually 75. 75 seems like a more reasonable number. I mean, Crom's Fauston had a hit rate of 80, so it doesn't seem too unreasonable that this weapon's stats would be 8 might and 75 hits. Probably 0 critical, though, based on, well, calculating the critical thing. But again, these stats are probably not final. That's pretty much all I can figure out from the bottom screen for now, but I want to draw your attention to the top screen, and here we're going to go more into the realm of speculation. We can see here a basic map. It looks Eastern inspired, so from the looks of things, you're going to be attacking an area occupied by Hoshido forces. And a lot of those enemies have a distinctly Hoshido look to them, so that does make sense. Now, the main thing that interests me is the characters we see here on the map. Most of them we don't know yet, but a few of them we might. Now, I'm going to go from right to left here, because that's going to lead me from the least interesting to the most interesting. So, on the very far right, we have a blonde-haired, presumably male axe user. Probably a fighter, maybe. Possibly the noir counterparts to the Hoshidan female axe user. That's what I'm guessing at least. To his left, we have a purple-haired axe-using wyvern rider. Now, this is pretty obviously Camilla. We can see in a lot of other images that Camilla is shown using an axe, so my guess is that she's a wyvern rider. And getting a wyvern rider this early into the game, I've actually heard a lot of people who have been very annoyed that wyvern riders were usually only used by the enemy country, and they would love to see a Fire Emblem game where you get a wyvern rider really early because you start with a country that's primarily specializing in wyverns. And here it looks like we're finally getting those wishes to come true. Now, to her left is pretty obviously the dancer from all the trailers. Now, we can see her on the map quite a lot, so presumably she's a very important unit, and she'll be with you in most of the chapters regardless of what side you're on. Now, noticeably here, her sprite doesn't seem to be different to her sprite in the Hoshidor map, so don't know if her change of clothes isn't reflected on her sprite at all, but anyway. Now, the one to her left looks like a female armor knight. Now, we just may have seen them before. Look back to this screenshot of the avatar turning into a dragon. Look at the armor knight beside him, or at least I presume that's an armor knight. Doesn't her hair seem similar to the sprite that we saw just then? I'm guessing that this is her. So, looks like we have a female armor knight available from the beginning. Perhaps a female member of the Draug archetype, which is going to be kind of interesting. Also, we can confirm that armor knights have been redesigned since Awakening, which a lot of people will be thankful for because of how bizarre they looked in that game. To her left, we have a grey-haired archer who, well, that's pretty much all we have to go on. It's certainly not the same grey-haired archer from the Hoshidor side, but apart from that, I don't think there's really all that much that we know. I mean, it could be either male or female, really. To the archer's left, we have what looks to be a very Tharia-looking dark mage. Kind of interesting, or they could just be a normal mage, but dark mage is my guess, because we can see quite a few generic enemies in the Hoshidor side map that seem to look like them. Well, at least kind of similar. Something that kind of worries me, though, I'm a little worried that this character is a deliberate, basically second version of Tharia just because she was so popular. That would kind of annoy me. I prefer the characters in this game to stand on their own. And to her left is a wall. Obviously, the wall's not a part of our party, so we can ignore that. To the wall's left, we have a pink-haired healer. Now, this healer is actually very interesting because, if you look very closely, just above the circled character, we can see what is very clearly the exact same sprite on a Hoshidor side map. So presumably, this is a healer who will join you regardless of what side you're on. Kind of weird, considering that you'll always have a sister who uses a healing staff regardless of what side you're on, but maybe they don't join you until a bit later. So here we have, again, a healer who's always with you, but look very closely. Notice that headpiece they're wearing? That looks kind of like the maids that we've seen earlier. Perhaps this is actually one of the maids, and maybe they're one maid who's always with you no matter what side you choose. Either that, or it is a different maid for each side, but they haven't finalized the different sprites yet. That's another guess that I could have. But anyway, it does seem to imply there are characters who do coexist between both versions of the story, at least as playable characters. Now, above the Armor Knight, we have what looks to be very similar to the Avatar, but a mercenary. We don't really know much about them, so let's skip them for a moment. Now, let's go to the upper row. Here we have two Cavaliers. Now, these two are actually quite interesting to me because we actually have seen them before, just not in detail. Look at this screenshot for a second. Notice the Cavalier who's a support partner to a female avatar in battle. They do look kind of similar to the Cavalier that we just saw on the map. Also, look at the very, very small glimpse of their portrait that we can see just below the avatar's portraits. That hairstyle and that hair color do match that sprite pretty well too. I'm also guessing that this is a Nor map, considering that the place they're in seems to be quite Asian, and the enemies look like Hoshidor troops and are wielding katanas. So my guess is that these two Cavaliers are the Cain and Abels, but only for Nor. We might have also seen the second Cavalier before. Here, the Armor Knight from before is protecting him from a dual guard against what looks to be a Hoshido soldier. Also, we can have confirmation here that dual guards do indeed still reduce damage to 0, which might be very annoying on enemies. Now, look at the Cavalier she is protecting. His hairstyle and colour does seem to match the other Cavalier sprite, so my guess is this is the other Cavalier. But there's something even more fascinating about this second Cavalier, and this is why I saved him for last. Look very, very closely at his sprite and make sure you memorize it. Got it? Okay, now I'm going to show another screenshot. Here's the shot from this most recent Nintendo Direct, where Sizor the Ninja seems to be joining on the Hoshido side. Look very closely at the enemy Cavalier who seems to be fighting the Avatar. They look remarkably similar to the sprite of that Cavalier who was on his side on the Nor version. This seems to directly confirm that yes, some characters who are playable in one version will be enemies in the other version. I mean, we pretty much already guessed this, but this seems to directly 100% confirm it. Having to fight and possibly kill characters who would be allies in the other path definitely, yeah, seems like it would have a pretty big emotional impact on the player. But there's actually something even more interesting about this Cavalier. Look at the sprite in the very top left-hand corner of the room that all your characters are in. Hang on a minute, that's the exact same Cavalier sprite, isn't it? But wait, this is very clearly a Hoshido map where you're fighting against Nor soldiers, and he's a blue unit here? Well, that's strange. Now, this seems to hint at something very interesting that I had assumed might happen. It's possible that, on the Hoshido side, the Nor Cavalier will start out as an enemy, but he'll be recruitable to the Hoshido side. So in some way or another, you will actually be able to use him in both versions of the game. But just on the Nor side, he's with you from the start. On the Hoshido side, he starts out as an enemy, but you can recruit him. This is very interesting, and it seems to remind me a lot of Radiant Dawn. In Radiant Dawn, you had two parties that fought each other in Part 3 of the game. Within those parties, there were some characters who could actually be recruited from one to the other. For example, Ha could recruit Jill from Mikaya's team over to Ike's team. This seems like a natural extension of that. While there may be some characters from the Nor side who will be enemies on the Hoshido side at first, you might be able to recruit them. And obviously, vice versa, there'll be some characters from the Hoshido side who, on the Nor side, you might be able to convince to defect to Nor. So, perhaps there are some characters who you don't have to kill if you're fighting against them. Maybe you can convince them to join you and be able to use them on both versions. However, I'm pretty sure this will be limited to only a small number of characters. Obviously not all of them. They say the actual characters of the game will be the same no matter which version you play, but I'm guessing quite a lot of them are going to be version exclusive. And of course, there'll be definite advantages to using them in one version compared to another. You know, it would be really interesting if there's a character who in one version of the game is an S-type character, who you don't recruit until very, very late in the game, and they're quite difficult to train. But on the other side, they're with you right from the start. That would be sort of interesting. Perhaps there'll be a character who starts out as a weak, unpromoted character on one route, but on the other routes, they join you much later on as a very high-level promoted unit. It has all sorts of interesting possibilities that I'd really like to see. Now, of course, here's the Hoshido side, and I could very well go ahead and analyze all of these sprites in the same detail I did for the other one, but I'll just go through this very quickly since this video is kind of running a little long as it is. So, starting from the top right, we have very clearly Sizor the Ninja that we saw before, so looks like he's going to be a playable character. Next to him, we have what is quite clearly, if you look at screenshots of the previous scene, that is pretty obviously Sakura, the healer/sister of the main character. Next to her is pretty clearly Hinoka. Next to her seems to be a green-haired thief or ninja that we haven't seen before. Interesting. Next to them is the Cavalier I already talked about. Next row, there seems to be some kind of person with Mickey Mouse ears or something like that. My guess is this is possibly Orochi, and maybe she's a mage. I don't know. Next to them is the Avatar. Next to them is, again, the same pink-haired healer from the Nor side. Then on the bottom row we have, well, on the bottom right we have Linka, the female axe user, who we've seen in quite a lot of the trailers. The one to her right is obviously Kazahana, who is going to attack the enemy. Next to them is the dancer, who's circled. And next to them, now this looks like it could be Tsubaki. There's been a pretty extensive debate on this person's gender. Some people are leaning more towards male, considering what their voice sounds like in some of the Japanese trailers, and that does make sense. When I first looked at them, I did initially think male, and Tsubaki apparently can be a boy's name as well. It's one of those names that used to be just a girl's name, but someone decided to use it for a boy to be subversive, and then it became a common boy's name. I mean, there's a lot of English names like that too. But the most interesting thing is that they're almost certainly a Pegasus Knight, and if they're a guy, that means male Pegasus Knights indeed exist in the series now. That's actually very interesting. One other thing, though, about this. If they are in fact a Pegasus Knight, notice that there's a distinct lack of a Cavalier duo here, but there is a distinct Pegasus Knight duo here. Perhaps Hoshido's equivalent of Cain and Abel are Pegasus Knights and not Cavaliers. That's, again, I know I say this a lot, but that's actually pretty interesting. Anyway, though, I think that's pretty much all I'll say for here, and this has gone on way longer than I thought it would, but yeah, there's a lot of details hidden in these trailers, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing these new games. So, if you have anything else that you've spotted on these trailers, be sure to share it in the comments so that we can get some discussion going. But I definitely look forward to these two games, and I hope you are too. So, see you next time, I guess.